Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of the top 10, top 10 Kliq member matches. Now if you're not familiar with who the Kliq is, it is Shawn Michaels, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Sean Waltman aka X-Pac, 123 Kid, 97 other names, and Triple H. I did put a restriction on this because if I didn't it would all be Shawn Michaels matches, with maybe one or two Triple H matches in there. So the one restriction I had to make the list is you had to have at least two members of the Kliq in the match. Now they could be going against each other or they could be teaming with each other. So as you'll see, some of these matches will have them teaming up, some of these matches will have them facing each other, but in my opinion, these are the 10 best matches with at least two Kliq members in them. With that being said, starting off with number 10. From WCW Super Brawl 7, The Giant and Lex Luger versus Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, The Outsiders. On paper, this doesn't sound like it would be a great match. The Giant, aka The Big Show, wasn't quite where he would get to be as a wrestler yet. Lex Luger, I contend, is very underrated. I think he's a lot better than most people give him credit for. A lot of people consider The Outsiders a little bit lazy, which I don't. I think they had some very fantastic matches. As you'll see, they do come up on this list again, spoiler. But I think this is one of those matches, this was in the early run of the NWO, not quite a year into it yet, that really showed what made them special. I really enjoy this match. I'm a big fan of the Outsiders as a tag team. Even though it wasn't a very long-lasting tag team, I think their impact is immense. I think what they did, they're both great wrestlers in my opinion, two of the best of that generation. I love Luger. I said it already. I don't think he gets quite the credit he deserves for how good he really was. And the Giant, aka The Big Show, I think most of the problems with his career have nothing to do with him. If he would have had solid booking and not done so many back and forth face heel turns, he probably would be looked at a lot more favorably than he is right now because he was a great worker. For a big man, he could wrestle as good or better than any big man ever. He had an aura to him. He had a believability to him. So I think the constant turns hurt his legacy, which is still going to be a legacy of a Hall of Fame wrestler. So how much did it really hurt, to be honest with you? But in fans' eyes, he's not looked at as fondly as, say, someone like Andre the Giant or Kevin Nash, another legend that's a big man in this match. A great match, though. I thought it was really good. That's why it's on our list. Now go from that, our number 9. Kevin Nash versus Triple H from Bad Blood 2003. A Hell in a Cell match. And while this isn't the greatest Hell in a Cell match or my favorite Hell in a Cell match, I do like what they did here because they took it back to what this cell should actually be. And yes, everybody loves the big spots, Mick Foley coming off the cage, Rikishi getting pushed off, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker wrestling on top of it. But they took it back to what it should have been. The cell should have been what was used to keep everything but the wrestlers out, kind of like the original reason for a steel cage match. And I like that about that. I like that they worked in that confines, and it was a brutal match. It was hardcore. They did have Mick Foley in there as a referee, so he added a bit of that to that as well. Not a lot is said about Nash and his second run in WWE, but I thought it was very enjoyable. Yes, it was hampered by some bad injuries and bad timing of those injuries, but this was a good match. I really enjoyed it. That's why it's up here on my list. Now coming from this, our number 8. This is actually a match I didn't see till probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and that's Shawn Michaels and Diesel versus Razor Ramon and the 123 Kid from Action Zone on October 30th, 1994. And to be honest with you, I don't remember Action Zone as a show. I don't know if it was one I just didn't get because it wasn't syndicated in my area, or if this was one of those USA shows that you just didn't watch because basically it was a rehash of what happened on Raw, or it might have shown some of the other syndicated stuff that you already seen on the other syndicated shows. But I don't remember Action Zone, and I probably even watched Action Zone back in the day. But I had heard about this match for so many years, how they had a great tag team match. And it was one of those things that just randomly came up on YouTube, and I watched it and I was like, Okay, now I understand why everybody talks about this match. Here you have 4 of what I would consider the 6 or 7 main guys of that new generation era, with Michaels, Diesel, Razor, and the Kid. Add in Yokozuna and Bret Hart, Owen Hart to that mix, and you have pretty much the nucleus of what made that generation and what made that era as far as wrestling wise. Again, I really enjoyed this match. It's one that's kind of a hidden gem. I don't know that a lot of people have seen it. If you have, let me know down here in the comments. If you remember it from the time, let me know down here in the comments. I didn't do much research on where Action Zone aired, so let me know that too, by the way. I know it's probably an easy Wikipedia lookup, but still. We're just talking about the matches here, and this was a great match. Like I said, kind of a hidden gem. I thought it was awesome. Now going from that, our number 7. Probably the best storyline on any match on this list. That's from Bash at the Beach 1996. You probably already know what's coming with me just saying that. Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger going up against Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and a mystery partner that would turn out to be Hollywood Hulk Hogan. And yes, this is the genesis of the New World Order. This is probably one of the biggest moments in the history of wrestling. Probably one of the most important things, especially to WCW as a company. And a lot of people talk about the moment. But the match and the setup and the way it was wrestled, to me, I think stands for itself as well. I enjoyed this for the spectacle. The match was a great match. The psychology of it was awesome. The way it was wrestled, the way Hulk Hogan came down, and there was question, and obviously the famous Bobby Heenan line, whether he's going to help the NWO or he's going to help WCW. The aftermath, and you could see the fans visibly upset with Hulk Hogan turning, which made it a perfect heel turn, probably the greatest heel turn of all time, in many people's opinion, and mine as well. I just love this match. I think it's so historically significant. Such a great match. It's something that every wrestling fan should probably watch at one point or another. There have been so many documentaries about it. You've probably already seen segments of it if you haven't seen the match itself. But I do recommend going out and watching it if you haven't. Now going from that, our number 6. Razor Ramon vs. the Kid on Monday Night Raw from May 17th, 1993. And this was before he was even the 1-2-3 Kid. I think they had called him the Lightning Kid on TV. He was the Lightning Kid in Global, but I think they had called him the Lightning Kid, the Cannonball Kid, a couple other different names prior to this match. This again is another one of those cultural moments. This is one of those things that really made Monday Night Raw must-see television. This was one of those things that really cemented the fact that anything could happen in the WWF, which was a tagline back in the day, still is to this day. But here you have basically a jobber in the Kid, which would later become the 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman, and he's going up against one of the big stars of the time, Razor Ramon, which nobody thought the Kid would win. There was no one in the world that believed he could win this match. And spoiler if you haven't seen it, which again you probably have because it's been on 8 million different documentaries. 1-2-3 Kid does pick up the win, hence earning his name in one of the most shocking victories in WWE history. One of the things that really made Monday Night Raw and really an exciting match. I really enjoyed this, hence why it's on my list. We'll go from that, our number 5. Diesel vs. Razor Ramon from SummerSlam 1994. This is another kind of almost a hidden gem match that not a lot of people talk about. Obviously, you have the two outsiders going up against each other before they were the outsiders. And to me, I've always been a Kevin Nash, aka Diesel fan, even during his Diesel days. And even before that in his Vinny Vegas days. I wouldn't say in Oz or Master Blaster renditions of Nash I was a fan, but that wasn't because of what he did. It was more of what WCW was doing with him. He really didn't start breaking out and shining until he was Vinny Vegas, and even then, he really didn't get that much of a hype behind him until he became Diesel. But I always liked him. As a matter of fact, he's one of the few wrestlers that I actually listen to their podcast every week because I find him that interesting still. Him, Dutch Mantel, another one of my favorites. Obviously Jim Cornette, because everybody listens to Jim Cornette's podcast, whether you love him or hate him. The Good Brothers, because the Good Brothers are awesome. And just recently, the new iteration of Stevie Richards' podcast I listen to, because I think Stevie has some great views on pro wrestling. Plus, I just love Stevie Richards. And also, the cool thing about it, his co-host James is the same co-host that's with Dutch Mantel on his podcasts. So anyway, I digress on the little podcast rant there. I thought this was a really fun match. Again, it's two of the big stars of the company at the time. Two of the guys that are the faces of the generation. Basically, two of the guys that you look at when you look at 1990s wrestling, and you'd be hard-pressed to find two guys that made a bigger impact than these two. Just an awesome match, in my opinion. Another one that I think is underrated that you should probably search out and see because it's just a really good match. Now going from that, our number 4, going from fighting against each other to teaming up with each other, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, The Outsiders versus Harlem Heat from Halloween Havoc 1996. And again, to spoil the rest of this list, to me this is their best match in WCW. Harlem Heat, another team that I think kind of gets overlooked when we talk about the great tag teams of all time. We talk about teams like the Dudley Boys, the Legion of Doom, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Freebirds, the Steiner Brothers. And Harlem Heat kind of gets pushed to the end of that pack, which is really a shame because to me, Harlem Heat is the best tag team in the history of WCW. Better than the Steiner Brothers, which I love the Steiner Brothers, don't get me wrong, but the Steiner Brothers kind of bounced a bit. They went to WWE, they went to Japan, they came back and forth, whereas Harlem Heat, they stayed there for the most part, even after, they broke up. And I know that they get love, and I know they're Hall of Famers, but you never really hear them in that top 5 or 10 list of greatest tag teams of all time, which I think is a shame because they deserve to be there. They are among the greatest tag teams of all time. They have some of the best matches in WCW history with a large variety of different tag teams over a very long period of time, like this one here against the Outsiders, which I think is a fantastic match. Like I said, I think it's the best Outsiders match in WCW. Just a great match. Two fantastic tag teams, hence why it's on my list. You go from that, our number 3, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels from SummerSlam 2002. Now this match was said to be a one-off return, not even a sanctioned match, a street fight, which I very well think it could have been if Shawn Michaels got in the ring and he didn't feel like he could do anything further. I think this was absolutely a test to see if he could still be Shawn Michaels even at 80% of where he was before his back injury, which I think, if you ask me, I think his comeback from here, from 2002 to when he actually retires, I think he's actually better on the second career than he was in the first career. And that's saying a lot because during his first career, he's probably one of the 3 or 4 best wrestlers in the world. I mean, he's just great. Shawn Michaels, a lot of people point to him and say he's the best in-ring wrestler of all time. I would definitely put him on my short list. I would put him up there with Ric Flair, Terry Funk. A lot of people don't give Terry Funk that respect for being a great in-ring technician, but I totally do. I think Terry Funk is one of the greats of all time, and so is Shawn Michaels. I think he really deserves the billing and all the accolades he gets. This is a fantastic match, a comeback of one of the greats of all time, and just set off his second part of his career to really cement his legacy. I love this match. Going from that, our number 2, from SummerSlam 1995, Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon in a ladder match. This is their second of their ladder matches, and I know there's a lot of people that say that this is the better of the two, which in some ways it is. Some ways they built on the first match on this one, what worked, what didn't work, but I think what sets the two apart, in my opinion, is the specialness of the first. Even though it's not the first ladder match or even the first ladder match in WWE, even though they've said that it was, I think that first one is just special for how important it was and how much of a game changer it was. Not to take anything away from this match, which is a fantastic match. I mean, like I said, you have two of the premier workers in all of wrestling in Scott Hall and Shawn Michaels, and they're really going at it here. There is something special every time these two got in the ring with each other, and you give them something like this, something that they could innovate, and they absolutely give us magic. Now, before we get to our number 1, we do a thing here on the top 10s called the best of the rest, basically things that were thought of for the list but didn't quite make it. First up on the best of the rest, Shawn Michaels versus Diesel from In Your House, Good Friends, Better Enemies. Again, this is another match that I think is a little bit underrated, that people don't talk about for its greatness. I hear a lot of people bring up more of the Diesel versus Bret Hart matches of the time, the Diesel versus Undertaker matches. But to me, for everything in this, the story, the match, the quality itself. I think this is an absolutely fantastic match. I think it's another one of those ones that if you haven't seen it, you should probably go out of your way to find it. It's easy to find on the WWE Network, or Peacock as it's called now. Trust me, folks, I'm still one of those people that calls WWE WWF even 20 some odd years later. So I will say Network and Peacock interchangeably too. I digress. Just a fantastic match, one that you should probably look out. I think it's highly underrated. Last but not least, on the best of the rest, we have Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, versus Konnan and Rey Mysterio from Super Brawl 9. Now, there's a big reason why this match didn't make the list, even though I think the match is fantastic. This is the match where the stipulation is if Konnan and Mysterio lose, Mysterio has to unmask, which, spoiler if you haven't seen a match from 20 plus years ago, they do lose, and Mysterio has to unmask. And I've always thought that Mysterio unmasking was a bad idea. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that during that time frame, Ray's run as part of the Filthy Animals and such, he did a great job without the mask. I mean, Rey Mysterio is an absolute legend, but he's one of those guys I don't think should have ever lost his mask, like a Mil Mascaras or a Jushin Thunder Liger. I think he's a wrestler that should have had an entire career with the mask on. We've seen him come back and put it back on, which is kind of a little bit controversial. I don't think it is so much anymore. It was at the time that he did it, but again, that's the reason it didn't make the list, but it is still a fantastic match. I do recommend checking out the match itself because it's absolutely awesome. Now, before I get to number one, if you think I put a match too high, a match too low, left a match off altogether, let me know down here what you think in the comments. Smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. With all that being said, my number one match involving two or more Kliq members, you could probably guess from what I just said on number two, Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon, the WrestleMania 10 ladder match. We are 30 years from when this match happened, and it is still being talked about today as one of the great matches of WrestleMania. To put that in context, if you average out the WrestleMania since then, let's say conservatively, there's 8 matches per WrestleMania card for the next 30 years, which there's probably more of, especially since the last couple of years they've went to 2 nights of WrestleMania. But let's just give it 8. So 8 times 30 is 240 matches. So conservatively, since this match happened, there have been 230 other WrestleMania matches. And you could probably count on one hand the amount of matches that were as good as this match and as impactful as this match. WrestleMania 10 to me still is probably the best top to bottom WrestleMania card in the history of the event. 17's good, 19's good, 18's good, 28 is great, 20 was good. There's a lot of really good WrestleManias, especially since this time frame. But to me, from top to bottom, it has the best opening match with Bret and Owen. Bret and Yoko is a great match. This match is great. Some of the other matches, they're more filler than anything, but they're not filler in a bad way. They're still really good matches. Even Savage vs. Crush is a really good match. But for everything this did as far as bringing the ladder match into WWE, making it a staple of WWE, really emphasizing the new generation, which we have WrestleMania 10 is the first WrestleMania without Hulk Hogan, and them really coming out here and cementing the, hey, it's a new era, we have new stars. I think this is fantastic. I still think this is probably the greatest ladder match of all time, if you ask me. And I think a lot of wrestlers should go back to this and watch this and see just how they worked it. It wasn't about the 15 ladders and constructing intricate designs and having crazy spots, which is cool, don't get me wrong. I enjoy seeing people getting package pile drivered off of one ladder onto another ladder that's bridged between the ropes, or a backdrop onto a ladder that's between the ring and the guardrail. I think it's a cool spot. I do enjoy those spots. But if you go back to this, they're basically working with one ladder. And it tells a fantastic story, in my opinion. There's a lot to say about simplicity. It's the old keep it simple, stupid method. However, I don't want to say it as easy as that. It's not a simple match. It's just the way that they worked and the way that they made everything important that makes this match really special, in my opinion. Now, with all that being said, this is my opinion of the top 10 Kliq matches, with the caveat of having at least 2 or more members of the Kliq in the match. Let me know what you think down in the comments here. What is your favorite match with the Kliq in it? Is it one of these? Is it one I skipped altogether? Let me know down in the comments. Again, smash a like, share, all that good stuff. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another Heel Heat Top 10.